Bread has always intrigued me, yet I never really dedicated much time to learning the skills necessary to be a good baker. This all ended when I retired. One of my first goals I set when I retired was to learn how to make a great loaf of sourdough bread.
I'm Chef Michael Salmon. I've been working in professional kitchen since I was 15 years old. I would like to invite you into my kitchen as I prepare recipes from my 2 cookbooks and my European foodie trips to Italy, France, and Spain. So let's get into the kitchen.
My journey into bread making began by watching videos of bakers online. And I came across one baker named Sarah Owens. And Sarah is a very articulate, soft-spoken woman. She explains some of the science, but she doesn't get bogged down in the unfamiliar terms or intangible principles. She's a real pleasure to watch. I highly recommend you looking her up and checking out her book on sourdough bread. I've got links to that all in the description of the video down below. My recipe is derived from her methods and her recipe. Bread making is not as time consuming as you may think, and if you have the right tools, everything comes together a little easier. There are a lot of steps, and bread making does require you to follow a pretty structured timetable, but actual hands-on time is not all that demanding. In the old days, I remember kneading bread dough for long periods, and in this recipe, the technique is simply stretching the dough to develop the gluten, so it's much easier on your body. Due to all the steps involved and my desire to show you each step in detail, I will divide this sourdough bread video into 4 parts. The first video is this introduction. With this introduction, I'm going to give you an overview of the ingredients, the techniques, and the tools required. In part 1, I'll go through the leaven, the making of the dough, and bulk fermentation. In part 2, we'll shape, proof, and bake the dough. And in part 3, we'll go through the inclusions, which is taking the bread to the next level with added ingredients like olives and wild mushrooms and cheeses. So let's go through the process of making sourdough bread. And we can preview the steps from the next 3 videos, starting with part 1, the leaven, dough, and bulk fermentation. We're beginning with the sourdough starter. We're adding 30 grams of sourdough starter and 75 grams of each water and whole wheat flour. And this is what's called the leaven. The leaven is an intermediate step between the sourdough starter and the dough. You take the starter, you feed it heavily the night before, and you get a larger, more fortified leavening agent for your bread. So make the leaven the night before and let it sit out on the counter covered overnight. The next morning we'll start making the dough by placing the leaven in a large bowl and adding water. Whisk the 2 to combine them well and start adding the flour. I use both a bread flour and a whole wheat flour. Mix them together well using a Danish dough whisk. And continue to stir until all of the dry ingredients are incorporated. After a brief rest and a hydration period, salt is added, and then the dough is divided up into 3 750 gram loaves. And now it's ready for the bulk fermentation stage. The bulk fermentation stage is a 3.5 to 4 hour period of time where the dough is stretched and folded every 30 to 45 minutes. This is where the gluten is developed in sourdough bread. In the second video, part 2, we'll be going over the shaping, proofing, and baking of the sourdough bread. The initial shaping of the dough is fairly simple. You just pull the top and the bottom into the center, fold in the sides, and then form it into a rough ball shape. For the final shaping, turn the dough over, stretch it, and stitch it, pulling the sides in as you work your way down the dough. And then roll it up, keeping tension on the outside. This tension will create a nice skin on the outside of your bread loaf. Dust the loaves with rice flour and place them in the bannetons where they'll proof overnight in the refrigerator. I like to cover them with a little piece of cotton cloth to absorb any moisture, and then some plastic. I like to use these elastic bowl covers. The next morning, remove the baskets from the refrigerator and take off the plastic and the tea towels. The tea towels will be quite damp. Invert the baskets onto parchment paper and remove the baskets. Dust off any excess flour with a pastry brush. And using a sharp bread lom, make decorative cuts in the top of the loaves. Here I'm making a wheat pattern. The bread will bake in Dutch ovens that have been preheated in a 480-degree oven. After 20 minutes, the lids will be removed and the bread will continue to bake for 15 more minutes. Cool the loaves on wire racks. In the final video, part 3, we'll go over inclusions, which are additions to the regular sourdough bread recipe that take it to the next level. Here I'm making a wild mushroom, roasted shallot, and Parmesan cheese bread, and I'm adding the ingredients right at the beginning of the bulk fermentation stage. Olives, nuts, dried fruit, and cheese all make great inclusions for sourdough bread. Let's talk about some of my recommended tools for making sourdough bread. I will include links to these tools in the video description below, and everything is also available on my shop on my website at chefmichaelsalmon.com. We'll begin with the Sourdough Starter, which you can buy online or get from a friend who's an avid baker. Small canning jars are great for keeping your sourdough starter. A digital kitchen scale is imperative for the accurate measurement of ingredients when baking. Danish dough whisks are great for working with batters and doughs. You'll wonder how you ever lived without one. Plastic dough scrapers are great for manipulating dough and cleaning out bowls. A bench knife or scraper is great for cutting doughs and cleaning work surfaces, but I also use it when I'm cooking to move product from my cutting board into sauté pans or mixing bowls. 2-quart Cambro containers are ideal for storing the dough during the bulk fermentation stage. I also use them to store ingredients such as dried fruits, nuts, flour, and whole grains. Bannetons are proofing baskets made from cane. They provide support for the dough during the proofing stage, and they also give the bread the characteristic lines that add beauty to the loaf. Bannetons come in various shapes and sizes. The most common 2 shapes are round and oval. Elastic bowl covers are very convenient and reusable. Reynolds parchment sheets are the perfect size for bread making. Bread loms transform plain loaves of bread into masterpieces and range from inexpensive handles up to hand-carved works of art. Enameled cast iron Dutch ovens keep the loaves of bread moist during the initial baking stage, which helps to create the desired crust. Hopefully you enjoyed this video and are inspired to recreate it at home. Make sure you hit the subscribe button below, and I would appreciate a thumbs up if you liked it. Comment below if you have any suggestions or requests for future videos. Check out my website at chefmichaelsalmon.com for recipes, my online store with links to my favorite tools and ingredients, and information on my 2 cookbooks.